Take two. What even? Good evening. Oh, go on. Okay, good. Hey? Me?
I put him off because I just suddenly remembered something, you know.
Laughing now. Good evening. If you do have a mobile phone, if you would like to put it on silent, please. Thank you. Right, massive welcome back to Ben Emlyn-Jones. Here are some questions of skeptics asking, who are they? Why are they wrong? And why does it matter? The sceptical mind has a range including healthy and robust, frightened, closed or fixed. Ben tonight challenges some of the skeptics who appear to support the maintenance of the status quo and mainstream thought. Also those who may use blanket terms to describe those who ask awkward questions or present decent quality evidence that challenge what others consider consensus, thereby possibly delaying or even sidestepping the truth pertaining to major events. So please welcome Ben Emlyn-Jones.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, thank you. Now it's yeah, it works. Bingo. Yeah, well, thank you very much, all of you, for coming. I mean, it's great to see you. Some of you I know already, and I've seen you before, and I haven't seen you for a while, so wonderful to see you all again. And this is me. Well, that was me, the portering Buddha. And my name is Ben Emlyn-Jones, and I was a hospital porter for 23 years, and I lost my job in rather, what I think is rather suspicious circumstances. I'm one of many people. The full story of how that happened, actually I think I discussed that on the first time I was a speaker here at New Horizons St Anne's, so it's a bit of an interesting story. Now, skeptics, right. Are there any skeptics here this evening? Good. Welcome. You're going to have the night of your life, I promise you. Yeah, so who are they? Why are they wrong, and why does it matter? Why does it matter? Now, I have actually lifted the subtitle of my lecture from this book, which I'll talk more about in a minute. What skeptics say about the paranormal, why they are wrong, and why it matters. This is Randy's Prize by Robert McLuhan, which I very much recommend. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But it's the thing, I mean, presumably those of you who are not skeptics, you have some kind of what the skeptics would call a belief. That is, and I'll be discussing the meanings of those words as well. But in other words, you believe that something like ghosts, the paranormal, spiritual issues, UFOs, conspiracy theories, you believe that some of these are true. If you're not a skeptic, I'm guessing that you believe some of these are true. This means at some point, though, you will encounter skeptics if you haven't already, and I'm sure you have. It may be a friend of yours. It may be a stranger you bump into down the pub and get talking to. Might be a member of your family. But you will encounter somebody who will say that that's not true. Okay, and this is why. And you'll get once you get caught in a corner by these guys, you inevitably end up in a debate. And it's very, very interesting indeed about it's a phenomenon, a psychological phenomenon that I think is worth looking into. And goodness knows the skeptics themselves have treated us as psychological subjects, so I think it's only fair that we return the favour, quite frankly. So, in order to try and answer this question about skeptics, who are they, why they're wrong, why that matters, who they are, I've actually done what very, very few people on our side of the debate do. I've actually gone to skeptic events, I've read skeptic literature, and I've watched skeptic film productions, documentaries and things like that, in order to try and understand and get inside their head. You know, it's quite something. I wish I could become a skeptic for a day. I think that's the only answer, although I might end up liking it, so probably just as well I can't. But again, this is the book I mentioned. It's Randy's Prize by Robert McLuhan. This is a pretty big skepticological book. So I've also studied some of the people on our side of the debate who are doing what I'm doing and investigating the skeptic movement as an object, as from the point of view of someone like me who, I don't, there's, the collective word skeptics use for us is woo-woo. They call us, that's a bit of it's a derogatory term, But that's what I am, according to their language. In other words, I believe that certain things such as UFOs, conspiracy theories, ghosts, spiritual issues, I think these things are true. So that would make me, in their terminology, a woo-woo. Now, the thing about skeptics is how they define themselves is probably a good place to start. And this is from Oxford Sceptics in a Pub. This is an organisation of which I'm a member and I regularly attend their meetings. A skeptic is one who rigorously and openly applies the methods of science and reason to all empirical claims. A skeptic provisionally proportions acceptance of any claim to valid logic and fair and thorough assessment of available evidence, and studies the pitfalls of human reason and the mechanics of deception so to avoid being deceived by others and themselves. That's how they define themselves. But as I'm going to demonstrate for you tonight, ladies and gentlemen, that is not a description of what a skeptic is. That is a slogan. That is an aspiration, one which they do not fulfill. And they themselves seem to be unaware of this. I would define a skeptic more as someone who has an ideology. I say one who thinks, this is a basic definition I can come up with of a similar type. One who thinks that anything paranormal, supernatural, conspiratorial or spiritual is not real. A mode of thought, psychological state or cultural meme that has an affinity with normality or the prevailing paradigm in all subjects. So this is an interesting position. Now, what motivates someone to become a skeptic? This is what I don't know. And again, I've listened to them describe for themselves, and they're not always honest with themselves about why they become skeptics. Now, I think I'll start with the most important issue as well of all when it comes to motivation, I think. And this is to do with one issue that skeptics and ourselves very often disagree on, or in fact almost always disagree on. And that is the question of what happens to us when we die. Now, there are several different views. This is certainly much closer to my own view of what happens when we die than a skeptic's view of when we die. Now, in philosophical terms, skeptics are almost always what we would call what is known as materialistic monists. That means that they believe that our consciousness, our thoughts, our feelings, everything that makes us is physical. It's a product of activity in our brain. It's a physical process, and that when the brain no longer works at the moment of our death, that process ceases to occur, and everything that defines us as what we are, is gone. Now, for skeptics, they see themselves in that sense. But what they believe is, they believe that the reason people like us believe differently, I believe in whether it's a heaven or whether it's a spirit world or anything like that, they see that as, in a sense, a psychological defence net. It's something that we have concocted, a fantasy, to protect us from the awful reality, because we are a sentient species that is aware of our own demise, and our own demise is going to come. And in order to avoid having to deal with the uncomfortable realisation of that fact, we have essentially invented something that means we don't have to. And I'll give you some examples here. But first of all, I'd just like to say that I believe this idea of wishful thinking cuts both ways. And I think I'll play a couple of audio clips now to illustrate that a bit better. Can I have clip number 1, please? Right. Now, I believe that what Professor French and what Andrew Copson... Can I go back to the slide? Oh, you're back on the slide, sorry. This is Andrew Copson, the first man you saw speaking. He's director of the British Humanist Association. Now, I believe that everything they've been talking about here in terms of psychological appeal cuts both ways. I'll explain to you what I mean. If you really do believe that there's no afterlife, and when you die, that's it, it's all over, it makes you a pretty brave guy, doesn't it? It makes you pretty superior to all those quivering sheep, those worthless, trembling fools who can't even get out of bed without this crutch, this comforting afterlife myth. So, therefore, I believe people in that frame of mind will be instinctively drawn, as the French said, in the other way around, to accept or to uphold evidence for the lack of an afterlife, and perhaps reject evidence which says that perhaps there is an afterlife. For that reason, because I think from what I know from talking to skeptics, this idea, which I call MBA, Materialist Bravery Award, is quite foundational to their sense of self-esteem. It's quite central to their identity as a group and as individuals. And so if you took that away, I think that it might have, again, it might have a negative effect on their morale, quite frankly. So therefore, that's why I believe that cuts both ways. I'll start with that bit, because that I think is very, very important. Now, you often see skeptics on TV. The man on the right there is Professor Chris French, who you just heard talking. And here he is debating with Gary Heseltine, who is a ufologist who also appears on TV a lot to promote the idea of UFOs. French here is a skeptic, and this is them arguing on This Morning. You can get that on YouTube. It's quite an interesting. It's an interesting thing to watch if you can. And again, there are people, celebrity skeptics, who do appear in the media and put the skeptical side of the argument across. And this is what you can do. I mean, if you want a career as a skeptic, I think this is the ultimate goal, really, to be one of these celebrity skeptics. Professor French is now retiring. He's close to retirement now, and I think his replacement is already waiting in the wings. And I'll say more about that in a minute, and I'll reveal to you who I think that replacement is. The skeptic movement has a healthy social life, and it's a thriving community of well-organised events, meetings, organised both on the internet and in real life. This is a Skeptics in the Pub meeting. Now, there's over 100 of these in the country. Wherever you live, there's going to be one near you. And they're worth attending. Woo-woos, believers in all sorts of supernatural and conspiratorial nonsense, as they call us, that we are welcome there. And you don't have to be a skeptic to attend. And these a group of people here at a Skeptics in the Pub meeting. Very often they just get together in a pub and talk. Sometimes they hire a room and they bring in speakers and things like that. But it's well worth attending one of those. Quite an experience just to attend one of those. Now, as I said, there's what you'll find with skeptics is there's a guy called Michael Barkan who wrote a book called Culture of Conspiracy, which basically was a searing criticism of us. And what he said there was what he called the cultic milieu, which is if you believe in ghosts or UFOs, the chances are you're also going to believe in conspiracy theories. You're more likely to. Now, I think there is a skeptic milieu. I think what I found with skeptics is if you ever found yourself in a debate with a skeptic, and for instance you're talking about the 9/11 issue, and you claim that one should be suspicious and question the official story. I'm sure this has happened to probably most people in this room at some point. It certainly has to me. Somebody, like I said, it could be a member of your family or a friend or just someone you bump into, a stranger, will say, that's not true. The official story is real, and this is because, and they'll reel off a list of arguments, which is what has been known as the debunking of the 9/11 truth story. I will bet my bottom dollar, or my bottom penny, or about bottom anything else, that that person also doesn't believe that UFOs exist. I'd also bet pretty much that they are a political atheist and secularist. I'd also bet that they don't believe in ghosts. What you'll find is if people are sceptical about one thing, they tend to be sceptical about most other things, almost everything else. So there is the equivalent of a cultic milieu on the opposite end, or the antithesis to our own, if Michael Barkan is even correct in that. Now, why are they wrong? Now, there's not going to be one section of this lecture where I tell you why they're wrong and that's it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, over the course of this evening, I'm going to talk about various issues in which I think they're wrong. And I'll start with some of what I believe are skeptic fallacies. Now, one of the things that they will do, if you're in a debate with one of these guys, it's worth making a note of these points, so that next time you're debating them, you may be better. If they've left you sort of stumped and bamboozled, these points might make you better armed in future. Oh, just one moment. One of the mistakes I think they make is raising the bar. That's it. This is a skeptic talking now. Demand evidence from your opponent for everything he says. Fair enough. I expect to provide evidence for everything I say. But when he delivers, demand more. When he delivers more, demand even more. Your thirst for evidence must be unquenchable. And this is known as raising the bar or shifting the goalposts. And you'll find they do this a lot, and they do it without even knowing they're doing it. They're not nasty people who are out to deceive us. They're deceiving themselves. They've been caught in a mindset which means they don't necessarily understand the mistakes they are making. Now, a good example would be if Now, for instance, if an old man walking his dog one night around the environs of a military base in the woods sees a UFO, okay, the skeptic will say, well, there's not enough evidence here. He was the only witness. No one on the military base saw it. The security police who were guarding the base, they didn't see it, they didn't report anything. There's been no official reports from the base at all. If that happened, then I would believe it, but until then, I'm afraid there's just not enough evidence. But what have I described in terms of what that skeptic just said, that I just been impersonating? I've just described the Rendlesham Forest incident, in which that actually did happen. In 1980 at Woodbridge Bentwaters Base, the security police guarding the base did encounter the UFO. There was an official report released by the base's deputy commander. But the skeptics still don't believe it. They've raised the bar. They've shifted the goalposts. Sock 'em with the Occam. Yeah. Occam's razor, all things being equal, most likely explanation is usually the right one. Now, Occam's razor is a problem-solving exercise, and it actually makes a lot of sense for systems that we actually understand. So, for example, what it means is always go for the most likely explanation for your problem first to solve the mystery. If your radio breaks down, try changing the batteries before you open it up and fiddle with a screwdriver in its innards. The reason is, flat batteries are the most likely cause of a radio's malfunction. Now, the mistake the skeptics make is they apply this to things such as the paranormal and conspiratorial matters. Well, you can't, because you see, in order to apply Occam's razor to your radio, you need to know how it works first. In other words, Occam's razor only works in understood systems where you can actually assign different causes a hierarchy of likeliness, and assign them different levels of likeliness within that hierarchy. When you're dealing with the paranormal, ghosts, UFOs, conspiratorial, spiritual matters, you cannot, because you are essentially dealing with an unknown quantity in which various explanations could be, one could be as likely as another or more likely. We don't know. So this is another fallacy of theirs. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary explanation. Now, I must say, this is actually a skeptic cliche. It was uttered by Carl Sagan a long time ago, and I think it even predates him. And if they hit you with this, this is just incidentally, you can really wear them up by uttering another skeptic cliche in an equally sort of like, wow, I've just said something original voice. So they say that to you, say, yeah, and you know something? I'll tell you something else. It's good to be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out. Well, believe it is funny, but believe it or not, Neil deGrasse Tyson said that at a conference last year. And he still got a laugh from the audience. So skeptics like old jokes, they always get laughs at them. But basically, to come back to the point here, what they're saying here is that they're assigning an arbitrary adjective to an explanation, and I think that is a mistake. Now, any explanation, any claim requires evidence, but the evidence should be suitable to the claim quantitatively. But that means if you see a UFO and you gather the data on it and it doesn't fit into weather balloons and Chinese lanterns, then that's a possible extraterrestrial sighting. The word extraordinary is simply an adjective that could apply to incredulous, unusual. It's kind of like it's a bit of a non sequitur. It's a nonsensical statement, this, because it's saying, well, if you make a claim which I find out of this world, wow, crazy, then you need an explanation that makes me go, ooh, wow, crazy. Doesn't really make any sense. The Santa Claus gambit. Now, this is interesting.